Pray, we have, our spirituality, where we go to water, we pray, sometimes for ceremonies we fast, sometimes 4 days, sometimes 7 days. And usually when you do this, you're preparing for a ceremony. This is to cleanse your mind and a number of other things too. And so, long ago, there was this young man. He was looking for a wife, and he went to the dances. Back in our villages, we would have what's called these townhouses, or the big council houses, and each village had one. And so the man went to the townhouse one evening, and he went there, and he's hoping to meet a wife, hoping to meet somebody. And well, he goes up, he's looking around, he talks to some of his friends, and he's waiting around hoping to see someone new come in, because sometimes at our dances you never know who might be visiting. So he's sitting in one of his area, in his clan area, and he's looking. He sees these two beautiful women walking in, two very beautiful women, and he's thinking, "Wow, I want to marry one of those women. They're beautiful." And so he talks to one of his elders. Through him, he asks him. Wants the elder to ask one of the ladies, if they'd marry him. And so the elder went to the lady, and then the lady replied back, came back to the young man herself and said, "I would love to marry you. I've been looking for a husband, but I'll have to ask my brother. I'll have to have his blessing." And so he says, "But we'll be back here in 7 days. I want you to fast for 7 days." And so the young man's like, "Okay, sure, no problem." And so he waited and waited, and so he got to the next dance 7 days later, and he gets there early. He's waiting for her and expecting her to be there early, but how we are, Native people are, just kind of, you get there when you get there. Sometimes you're real early, sometimes you go late. If something starts at 7 o'clock, you don't get there till 7:30 or 8 o'clock. Because that's when the cool people show up, I guess. So anyway, so that young man, he's waiting there until finally, a little while later, the sisters come back. The sisters, they're looking beautiful. They got their nice dresses on, their hair's nice and fixed up, and it's really long hair. And so, he thought, man, I hope I can marry one of them. They're just so beautiful. And so before they go see him though, they're going around to the other men. They're kind of talking to them. He's like, "I'm not worried about them. I'm going to marry her. They can have their fun, whatever." And so finally come over to him, and they say, one of the sisters says, "Well, we talked to our brother, but he wants to meet you." And so the young man says, "I'd love to meet your brother." And they say, "But you cannot tell anyone where you are going. If you tell somebody where you are going, you will surely die." And the young man thought, "Okay, sure, whatever." And so he said, "We're going to wait until nighttime. We're going to wait till everyone's asleep, then we'll leave." And again, he's like, "Okay, sure." So it finally gets dark. People have left. People are asleep. And so he says, "All right, now, just tell me where we need to go." And so the sisters, one of them said, "Well, follow us. We'll show you the way." And so they start walking. They're going towards this trail. They're walking by the river. And so as they're walking by the river, the sisters suddenly stop where they were at. They look to the right and says, "All right, well, follow us." So he starts walking with them. And then with the sisters, they step into the river. He's like, "What are you doing?" He says, "This is the way to our home. Here you can follow us home." He's thinking, "I don't know, I might drown." And the sisters say, "There's no reason to worry. Follow us home." And so, I was like, "Okay." So he gets into the river. He puts one foot in really carefully, and sure enough, it turns into grass. He's thinking, "Well, that's weird, but okay." He's blinded by love. He's not seeing all the signs. And so he follows them, and they come into another trail. And sure enough, they stop again and say, "All right, follow us to our home. This is the way to our home." It's another part in the river. He's like, this is water. This looks worse than the other one. I might drown. And he says, no, follow us. This is the way to our home. So they step into it, and then he steps in, again, turns into grass, a grassy trail. And he's thinking, there's something wrong. Don't worry about it. So he keeps going, and then finally comes to a waterfall. And they tell him, our home is behind this waterfall. This is actually what it was told to me, what was taught to me, was that this took place around Tallulah Falls area. Well, whenever they went into that falls, they went behind the waterfall, the whole environment changed. Then he finally went into their house, and he stayed at the door, he stayed at the opening. And he looks in, and he's like, this is a nice place, this is a nice house, this is a nice home. And the sisters said, please sit down. And he's getting ready to walk over towards where they were pointing to, but he looks and says, I can't sit there. And they're like, no, it's a chair, please sit down. And he says, no, that's a turtle. I'm not gonna sit on no turtle. And so the sister's like, no, this is a seat, please sit down. And he's like, no, I'm just gonna hang out by the door back here. And yeah, I'll wait for your brother right there. And so the sisters, they say, well, suit yourself. So they pull their hair off their heads and they set it on the fireplace. And he's like, what? Huh? What's going on here? I don't like this. And the sisters, they can sense him thinking these things, and they don't want him to leave. Well, all of a sudden, this loud clash of thunder just came behind him. And the sisters were like, oh, well, there's our brother. He's close by. And so he's like, your brother? I don't see him. And all of a sudden, another clash of thunder comes by. And then all of a sudden, you see this tall, 8-foot tall man get into the house. And he's like, oh my goodness. And he looks up and he says, and the brother, and he says, I'm getting ready to go to a council meeting. I would love for you to join me. And so the young man's like, yeah, I would love to, but I need a horse in order to get there. I'm really tired from walking. And so, in his mind, he's thinking, I'm gonna escape. I'm getting out of here. So the big, tall brother man, he's like, hey, sister, please get our friend a horse. And so one of the sisters goes out, brings this big, giant, white Utana snake. And the man's like, that's not a horse. And the sister's like, no, this is our horse. Please follow our brother. And the man, he's trying to stall for time. He's like, I'm sorry, I can't ride that horse without a saddle. And so they come back out. The other comes out, and he comes back in. She comes back in with another giant rattlesnake. This time, this one's red. And so he's like, gosh, I just want to get out of here. And they can sense this. They can feel him having these feelings, and they can read his thoughts. And he says, no, you're not leaving. And he says, I don't want to be here. Well, if I'm going to go to council, at least bring my saddle. And then they finally go back out, and then they bring in another turtle, sit it on the snake. He's like, what is this? What are you doing? I don't want to be here. I want to go back home. And the brother steps up to him and says, you're not leaving. You're a coward. And lightning shot from the man's eyes, striking that young man senseless. By the time the young man came back to, he was holding onto a laurel thicket. And he was in the river. He woke up and no house, no cave, no snakes, no thunder beings. He's like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go back home. And so he gets back home and the people are like, where have you been? You've been gone for so long. He says, I've only been gone for one day. He said, no, you've been away from us for so long. Where have you been? Tell us what's happened. So he tells them everything that he had seen, everything he came across. And the people, the thunder beings, the giant Utane rattlesnakes, everything he had seen. But one detail he forgot. There's one thing they told him before they ventured out. You are not to tell anyone what you had seen, or you will surely die. And 7 days later, after he told that story, he died. Because you don't go to the underworld, come back and live to tell about it. That's the story of man marrying Thunder's sister. Thank you. All right, next up, we got Mr.